Edwina Mckenzie of Hermosa Beach, California, was born Edwina Trout, 1885, in Bath, England. By the time she was 27, she had already traveled to the U.S. and back across the Atlantic. In April of 1912, she was scheduled to cross the seas to New York again, this time to visit her sister in the U.S. She was signed aboard the White Star liner Oceanic. However, due to a coal strike in England at the time, her passage was transferred to another ship, due to sail April 10th on its maiden voyage. Little did Edwina realize the profound impact the voyage of that grand ship would have on her life. Edwina Trout was a passenger aboard the White Star Line's newest and largest liner afloat, the RMS Titanic.
Somerset, England. And when I was born, the nurse told my dad that I was a boy. And I was born on a Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, and my father was on the way to London. And you have to register the babies in 4 days or so. So when he came back, he thought, oh, I better go and register the baby. So he went and registered me, Edwin Charles Trout. When we came home, my mother had many children. I was her adopted child, and the worst baby, crying all the time, crying and crying. And so my dad came home and said, we're glad to see him. I'd been crying so much. And he said, he said, well, I said, you told me it was a boy. And so he'd registered me as Edwin Charles. So I had to be re-registered, and that's how I got the name Edwina Celia. My sister got married, and of course she came to the United States to live. And as nature is, she's going to be a mother. So my mother wanted me to come out to be there, you know, to be with my sister, to help her along with the baby. But my sister was a strong, healthy, husky girl, and I was we never did get along together for playmates because she was so robust, and I was so, always was so, you know, I don't know what you call it, retarded word. No. Well, health retarded. I didn't have the health, the strength that she had. I bought my ticket to be on another boat, but they canceled her sailing, and I could be transferred, so I got transferred to the Titanic. And some of my friends were rather doubtful about it, but I didn't feel that way. So when I got on there, a woman said to me, you know, she said, this boat will never reach New York. Oh, I said, don't be saying things like that. Well, she said, I can't help it, but it'll never reach New York. And she's my roommate. And her name was, oh, I forget now. She kept on telling me that, so Sunday came and we had a nice service, and she kept telling me this boat went, so I said, oh, I think you need a tonic, you know, something to drink. So I went down and I got her a little bouillon. I said, here's your bouillon. And she said, no, I need replenishing. I said, well, I think that you need it. So I went down to the steward, and of course she was English. She said, good morning, madam. He said, were you at church this morning? I said, yes. Well, he said, you know, we boys, he said, we don't know one another. We're all picked from various boats to have the honor of being on the maiden voyage. And he said, did you hear that singing and that sermon? Oh, he said, it was so wonderful. He said, it was out of this world. and said, in fact, I think we're too heavy to last long. So I thought, well, there goes another. So I take back, I said, here's your William. I said, oh, I don't want it. He said, but I know. Oh, no. She says, I just know this boat will never reach New York.
On Sunday night, April the 14th, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic, under clear skies, grazed an iceberg at 22 knots, tearing open a 300-foot gash below her starboard waterline, flooding her to her number 5 boiler room. Because 1/3 of her hull was open to the sea, her watertight doors, said to make her unsinkable, were useless. The world's largest luxury liner, the unsinkable Titanic, had barely 4 hours left to survive.
Just after 11 o'clock at night, I was in bed sound asleep when they came and called all passengers, put on your life preservers, go up on boat deck. So I went up on boat deck, and there was a lad there from Buenos Aires, and he says, I said, this boat's going to sink. He said, no, it didn't. He said, well, I said, this Miss Keene keeps telling me it never reached New York. He said, I'll show you. And he said, up in that corner was a box or something. He said, see that? He said, if we're in danger, that would be open. I said, I better put on a warm coat. And I went back and put on a warm coat. And I looked on deck. I looked, and most of the boats had gone. I was so surprised. I had the idea that, you know, this is my watery grave. The captain was there, and he said, stand back. The men and women there, and he said, women and children only. And there was a man there with a baby in his arms, and he said, well, he said, I don't want to be saved, but we'll save this baby. And no one offered, so I said, well, I will. So me, oh, you're foolish to save a baby. Pardon me, so I thought, well, I always do foolish things, so I said to the officer, if I save a baby, I said, what'll happen? Oh, Mom, he said, the White Star Line will take care of both of you. As much as to say, why do you ask? So I said, when you go in the lifeboat, I said, yes. So the lifeboat was there, it was lifeboat 13. So the stewardess jumped in the lifeboat first. Then they tossed the baby into her arms, and they said, will you go in? And yes. So I looked, there was the ocean, there was a lifeboat. I thought, oh, I'll never make it. But I jumped, and I got in there, and I hurt my ankles, but anyhow, I made it. There was a light in the distance. The captain said, now, men, row to that light, empty your boats, and come back and pick up more passengers. Our men rowed and rowed, but we never could make that light.
When asked about the site of the great liner sinking, Mrs. Mckenzie remembers,
I couldn't take my eyes off it. You see her going, her lights are all lit, and see them, each row of light disappear, each row of light disappear. Finally, she went down. The scream when finally she went down, that scream was worse than any siren. 1,500 people went down at one time.
2 days later, the world was shocked at the news of the tragedy. Due to the sporadic medium of wireless telegraphy, the first reports were exaggerated and inaccurate. Many reports wrongly blamed Captain Edward J. Smith. It turned out that only 705 passengers were picked up by the Carpathia, and that nearly 1,400 people lost their lives in water 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The Carpathia, a small Cunard Company liner, raced 58 miles to the scene at full steam, madly dodging icebergs to pick up the Titanic's lifeboats. These photos were taken from the Carpathia railing as the last boats were rescued at 8:30 that morning, 6 hours after the Titanic went down. This is believed to be the actual iceberg that the Titanic collided with on that cold night.
We were in a school of whales. We had awful time. We thought our boat would be upset, you know. And the man that manned our boat, he didn't have a hat. So somebody gave him a cap and he made a knot here and 2 knots here. He looked very funny. Finally we saw the berg that did the damage, and then a boat came. And the boat was the Carpathia, and it picked us up. We get on the Carpathia, and it took us 4 days to get to New York. And the captain, as soon as we got on board, he had a service of thanksgiving for the living and a memorial service for the dead. And people were dying on board, and we had burials at sea, and we were in a school of whales, and it took us 4 days to get New York, and there wasn't anything to be proud of. There was something happening all the time. My father was unable to eat anything until he heard that I was saved.
In late 1981, 69 years after the disaster, this headline was released to newspapers around the U.S. Texas oil man Jack Grimm had financed an expedition to locate and possibly salvage the remains of the lost Titanic. However, only one photograph was ever released showing one of her 3 giant propellers 2.5 miles down in the ocean. After that, nothing. Should the ship ever be raised, Edwina feels it would be her duty to visit her once again.
Most beautiful ship in the world. I feel it my duty to go on it.
For some, the Titanic will remain an enthralling legend. But for Edwina Mckenzie, it will always remain a landmark in the destiny of her life.